and welcome to another Isrrt webinar. And today, our webinar, we are going to be celebrating professional culture in radiography. I'm joined by three wonderful guests today who have generously given their time to speak. So, good morning to everyone in the Americas. Good afternoon to those who are in Europe and Africa, and good evening to those in Asia and in the Australasia area. Unfortunately, we are not joined today by our president, Dr. Napapong Pongnapang. He is unfortunately currently in transit, flying from India back to his homeland, so he's not able to join us today in that. But we have some really great speakers lined up, and I think we should just get straight into it and go through that. So our first speaker is Elizabeth Balogun. Elizabeth graduated in 1997 with a diploma from the then Federal School of Radiography in Yaba, Lagos. The school is now a Department of Radiography in the University of Lagos, Nigeria. The desire to learn more and be relevant in training younger radiographers led to further education, and Elizabeth gained a Bachelor of Science from the Queen Margaret University in Scotland and a Master of Science in Medical Imaging from the University of Leeds in the United Kingdom. A retired Deputy Director of Radiography from the National Orthopaedic Hospital, as well as being a visiting lecturer to the Radiography Department of Leeds City University. A full-time lecturer with Ajayi Crowther University in Oyo Town, Oyo State, Nigeria. Served on several committees such as curriculum drafting, investigative, as well as disciplinary committee. Elizabeth is committed to the Association of Radiographers of Nigeria, the ARN, in which she progressed through the ranks and became the president from 2017 to 2019. She started out as a student member and volunteered during the annual conference to serve as the assistant secretary to becoming the national secretary in 2007. She is presently past president of the ARN, and the journey with her journey with Isrrt began in 2006 as an associate member, council member in 2012. She was elected regional coordinator for professional practice for Africa in 2014 to 2022, and is currently the Isrrt regional director for Africa, and that will go through till 2026. Elizabeth is also married to a professor of radiology and blessed with 4 children. You must be very busy, Elizabeth. Thank you very much for giving your time to speak, and we look forward to seeing your presentation.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you so much for joining this webinar of the Isrrt today. It's a good day and a few days to the end of the year. There's nothing better than learning at a time like this. My name remains Elizabeth Balogun, and today we're going to be discussing professional culture in radiography, and I'm assigned to this topic, which is bridging socio-academic levels in radiography and its impact on patient care and professionalism. My name is Elizabeth Balogun. I'm a radiography lecturer of the Department of Radiography and Radiation Sciences, Ajayi Crowther University, Oyo State, Nigeria. I'm also the Isrrt Regional Director for Africa. I'm predominantly an African, and I am born, bred and brought up in Nigeria. That's my country. And I work in the Department of Radiography and Radiation Sciences in Ajayi Crowther University, Oyo, South west states of Nigeria. So these are my outlines, and there are very few, and we're going to go through them one after the other. First and foremost, I need us to do some definition of terms. I know we're familiar with some of these terms a lot, and we use them interchangeably. But while preparing for this webinar, I get to also realize that we need to also look at them once again. First and foremost, the word culture. Culture is actually learned by people as a result of belonging to some particular group. And for us, it's belonging to the radiography community or the radiography world. Sometimes people think culture is innate or inborn, but culture can actually be learned when you find yourself among a group of people. So culture is about language, manners of interacting, thoughts, values, expected behaviors, practices, relationships, customs, rules, rituals, and of course, courtesy. Another word I also define is sociology, because social is actually a derivative from sociology or socialization. And so I bring it down to professional socialization, which is a process by which new members acquire the values, beliefs, expectations, and culture of the group, including its ideals and how to conduct themselves to which they will belong. And so here, the people in purple color are already in that group, and you see them bringing in the person in green. And of course, with time, the person will appear purple after learning the norms and standards of that. And then what is academic? It will surprise you to know that academic is actually used to describe work or a school, college, or university that places emphasis on studying and reasoning rather than on practical or technical skills. I know a lot of people will want to say no, radiography is basically a skill acquisition thing, but we've moved away from the hospital-based training to academic training, and that's why we're actually reviewing and looking at the topic today. So it's about analysis, research, methods, and all those things we do in the academics. And so what is professionalism? We all say we are radiographers, we are professionals. Professionalism is about the skill, it's about the good judgment, it's about polite behavior that is expected from a person who is trained to do a job well, very well. There isn't any room for mistake. And so professionalism is commonly understood as an individual's adherence to a set of standards, code of conduct, or collection of qualities that characterize accepted practice within a particular area of activity. So professionalism comes with ethics, accountability, communication, competence, reliability, and of course, appearance, because the way you dress is the way you are dressed. And so we take a bit of the overview of the team. I know I'm talking to radiographers, so these are just reminders for us. And I need us to follow me on this journey. So what is radiography? And who is a radiographer? Well, radiography, according to the Radiographers Registration Board of Nigeria, where practice, which is established by an act of the parliament, means the art and science of the application of various forms of radiant energy on human beings in order to promote health, treat diseases, and produce various diagnostic images, including, but not limited to, X-ray imaging, radionuclide imaging, ultrasonic imaging, thermographic imaging, magnetic resonance imaging, often when medically indicated. And then the radiographer is there for that person who is trained, certified, registered, and licensed to practice all or some of the above. And that name, radiographer or radiological technologist, is not just a name or just a profession. I want to remind us that it's a patented name, It is backed up by law in my own country and in several countries where it is practiced. It is guided by codes of practice, and the radiographer, the radiological technologist, actually spends the most time with the patient, who is the king and the person that needed the utmost care in the hospital setting. We've defined socialization, and so we're just going to talk about what social levels are. Now we're linking it strictly to radiography and the fact that it's a professional, is a profession. And so what are the social levels that we have in our profession, radiography? First, we have the mentor and the mentee. I'm not talking about the general social level where we talk about the rich, the poor, the that, but we're talking to the social levels as it is applicable in radiography as a profession. So we have the mentor, and the mentor are usually 3 years or more postgraduate. They are those that have specialized in one thing or the other, one aspect of the profession or the other, such as CT, MRI, nuclear medicine, ultrasound, you name it. And they've had several work experiences. For instance, accident and emergency, where I practiced as a clinical radiographer before I moved to academics. It was an accident and emergency. And so for every patient I attend to, I can just attend to them in minutes and get them back to the ER. Some have specialized in oncology, that is the therapy aspect of our profession. Some have specialized in psychiatry, some have specialized in OBGYN, some have specialized in intervention radiography. And so these are regarded as the mentors. And then the mentees, they exist. These two social levels actually exist. Aside from the other cadres where you have the radiography manager, the intern, the assistant radiographer, and all those levels. These are the major classifications. I'm going to put them for the purpose of this lecture. And so the mentee are usually less than 3 years postgraduate. For instance, in Nigeria, we have them as interns, fresh from school, who are doing their 1-year internship in the hospital setting, still after school, to get a good grasp of the skills of the profession. We also have them doing their 1-year national service to the nation as a give back to the contribution of the government to their education. And so they are posted majorly to the rural areas or areas where there's lack of this profession. And we also have the fresh employee into different hospitals as the mentee. You also have those who come in just for a work experience when they planned to join the organization and they needed to come and see how the organization runs. We also have those that are there to acquire skills. For instance, there are people who decide to specialize in IR. There are people who decide to specialize in therapy. There are people who decide to specialize in ultrasonography. And so while they are acquiring these skills, they are made to stay under a mentor to learn. And also, when you stay on the job over time, each time you are a mentee, as you move from being a band 5, a fresh radiographer, a senior radiographer, a radiography manager, as you move to this post, you are a mentee for a period of time until you learn what the post demands of you. And so we also look at the academic levels. There's what is called the faculty cadre for the purpose of this lecture. And those are our professors, the associate professors, the senior lecturer, the lecturer 1, the lecturer 2, the assistant lecturer, and graduate lecturer. And I hope you also know that in this cadre, there's also that process of the mentor and the mentee. We also have the student cadre, postgraduate students, the undergraduates, the certificate of diplomas, the secondary education, primary education, and of course, homeschooling. I was homeschooled before I actually got into the primary school, and that also exposed me to who I am today and what I have become. And the big question is, remember our topic is bridging the gap. Is there a gap? Yes or no? The answer actually depends on who is answering this question. And so I'll give you a moment to just think about it. Between the social and the academic, is there a gap between the community and those that are actually training and doing the research? Is there a gap? And I would say yes. And this is because there is application of research findings in clinical practice. And so there's this side of the research, there's that side of the practice. And I will also talk about the superiority between the practitioner and the academia. I don't know for whichever part of the world you're in, but for us, the academia feels they've done the research, so they have it firsthand. The practitioner feels they've got the skills and they've done this over and over again. And so changing things around because there's a new research that has said, okay, this is how we need to do it again. And so that brings a bit of a friction. So who bears the brunt of this gap? Training? Do you need longer time, shorter time, or lack of it? Or the patients who are actually our clients, our customers, and of course, the king in the hospital? So then, let's bridge it. How? These two pictures speaks volumes. The first one is an academia in full regalia. As a matter of fact, for those who know my registrar very well, the registrar of the Radiographers Registration Board of Nigeria, this is aimed at an induction ceremony in University of Maiduguri in northeast part of Nigeria, celebrating the best graduating student in the presence of the provost and the management of the school. And so it's done well academically, it's done well, it's come out in flying colors. And the next picture here is the practitioner in practice, actually looking very sharp and ready for the day's job. Could this best graduating student translate to this sharp guy ready to take on the job and deliver service? The point where we bridge it is when this person that has graduated as the best graduating student, doing all his academics, coming out in flying colors, is able to translate all that he has been able to learn academically through practice and delivering accurate service to the patient. And that patient, we want to know what will impact them. Like I said, bridging this gap just leave us with evidence-based practice, because the evidence-based medicine of practice is actually what connects individual clinical expertise, best external evidence, and of course, the expectations from our patient or our patient values. So whatever it is that you have brought in from the academic, from the clinical practice, from everything that is out there, and merge it to a better outcome for the patient, then you have been able to actually improve or bridge the gap. And so what will this do to improving our impact on patient care? First and foremost, there's going to be a general and special care. Professional attitude of radiographers are going to be improved because they've been taught, they've had to learn, they've had to be mentored over time. There's going to be adequate infection prevention and control because this evolves every time. We're just coming out of the COVID era, and we all needed to learn, and to relearn a lot of things. And of course, the academia came into the rescue by doing several research in conjunctions with the practitioners or the clinical practitioners, and were able to see how to do things better and then to move. The moving and lifting techniques of patients are going to be improved. You now know you could do it better in some ways after you have the evidence that it has worked or that it's going to work. The medical legal issues and applications of ethics to the practice are also going to be top-notch because you have been exposed to the patient rights, the human rights, your own rights as a radiographer, what you should do, what you should not do, at what point you know your limits, you know your boundaries, and you are ever able to keep them. And wait a minute, because the world is dynamic and is moving, the research is continual. And so a lot of evidence-based practice are popping up every day, and we're applying them in the day-to-day running of the clinics and on the job to make life better, not just for ourselves, but also for the patient. What are the impacts on professionals? Remember I said that thing that bridges the gap between the academia and the society, or a group of radiographers, or a group of practitioners, that socialization, that social, that place where we all belong, is evidence for practice. There are existing formal research which provides the essential building blocks for professional practice. It will bring about evidence in practice, where there'll be applications and actions, where there's process of transformational, there's locally produced evidence, there's data generated by practice, which is meshed with research-based evidence, to provide a dynamic decision-making and learning environment for us all to do. And of course, there'll be evidence of practice, which will be the results and the impact and the outcomes, of course, on our patients, who are the king, and for those for whom we are actually in practice. So, ladies and gentlemen, for this short period, we've been able to look at a few things. We all know what the professional culture is. We talk about ethics. We talk about doing it right. We talk about our behavior, our language. We talk about communication, adequate communication to our patients, which we also learn to get better at when there is evidence-based practice. If you're doing it this way before, you also want to do it better the next time that patient comes our way. So I'll conclude by saying, to bridge the gap, we need to all learn together, both those of us in academia and those of us in radiography community. And of course, it's the same community, whether you're in academia or you're just a clinician or a practitioner in this community. We have to always check the evidences available and be able to apply them as they come, and they're sure that those evidences are there for us to use. We should also apply it for better outcomes for all of us and our patients. We all started with the darkroom, manual processing, and all those experiences. But today we talk about the direct digital radiography. We talk about the direct digital radiography. We talk about the cloud storage. We talk about the remote reporting. And all these are making us have enough time, better time, more time with our patients. I've told you before, as radiographers and as practitioners, we spend the most time of all other people in the department with our patients. And so this society, this social society that we belong, is large enough to accommodate all, no matter the level, be it academic or social. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time. Thank you for listening to this short lecture today. I hope it has aroused a lot of thoughts in your mind to say that there should never be a gap in the first place. And if there are, let's bridge it. Thank you all for your time. And if there are any questions, you can always reach out to me and I'll send it on the chat for this platform. And I'm still going to be here live to take any of your questions. These are my few references. And once again, I'm Elizabeth Balogun. Thank you for your time and thank you for listening. Bye.
Thank you, Elizabeth. That was a very good talk, and certainly very thought-provoking as well in terms of really bringing together what we all really need to understand about our profession as well. And thanks for the reminder to put all of the questions in the chat. So if you do have any questions that you'd like to ask any of our speakers tonight, then please put the questions in the chat as well. Our next speaker that we have is Hannah Nichols. So Hannah is going to be talking about the creative inclusive spaces, which is the perspective of the LGBTQIA+ community. Hannah is a radiographer and a clinical educator at St. Vincent's Hospital in Melbourne, in Australia. She is trained in all modalities and enjoys the variation and challenges provided by rotating regularly through those modalities. She has always had a keen interest in education. She completed a postgraduate certificate in clinical education this year. And she is also a previous student of mine at the Royal Children's Hospital as well in Melbourne, where she did some of her training. In her spare time, Hannah plays Aussie rules football at a local club and renovates her home with her girlfriend and their greyhound. Thank you for joining us for Hannah's talk.
Hi, my name is Hannah. My pronouns are she, her. Today I'll be talking to you about creating inclusive spaces from an LGBTQIA+ perspective. Before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm presenting this talk on land that belonged to the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. In Australia, sovereignty was never ceded, and to this day, the lands I live and work on belong to the First Nations people of Australia. I'd like to pay respect to the elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples online with us today. I'd also like to make a quick note about the LGBTQIA+ acronym. When I first started researching for this presentation, the longest version of the acronym that I found was LGBTQIP2SAA. Occasionally throughout this presentation, for simplicity's sake, I shorten it to LGBT or LGBT+. But through this, I don't mean to exclude anyone or disrespect anyone who is identified by the other letters. And before I get right into this, I'd also like to provide some context as to why I present this topic. So I began my career at St. Vincent's Hospital here in Melbourne in 2015, and at the time I had a long-term boyfriend. Not long after beginning, I broke up with my boyfriend and began dating, and I also learned to spend a bit more time with myself. And throughout this time, I ended up questioning a few things about my own identity, and I eventually came to terms with the possibility that I might be gay. Now, sexuality and workplace aren't two words that are generally used in the same sentence. However, I'm really lucky that I work in an incredibly friendly and welcoming department where so many of my colleagues are also my close friends. I thought about how my colleagues were able to talk about their hetero relationships and dating life, and decided that I wanted to have that kind of authenticity and to be able to talk about my own. So I slowly started talking to my closest workmates, and I initially came out as bisexual. Eventually, I told everyone else, and honestly, in the nicest way, no one cared. It didn't change anything. No one treated me differently. And overall, it was a really positive experience. After some time had passed, I reflected on what it was like for me coming out at work. And I realized that there weren't any indicators within our department that it was a safe space for LGBTQIA+ people. Also, being a Catholic hospital, I wondered how the environment might feel to someone new starting. I recognized that I was incredibly privileged by knowing that I would be supported by my friends, my colleagues. And I wondered if a new person could feel as though they could be their authentic self in our space. And I also thought about how being bi or gay was on the more socially accepted end of the LGBTQIA+ spectrum, and wondered how much harder it might be for someone who is trans or gender diverse to come out in my department. And that's where all this began. Today, I'll be going through LGBT+ people in Australia and how we're represented in the population here. I'll talk about some of the key differences in terms such as sex and gender. We'll talk about gender around the world, use of different pronouns and what they are, mental health in the LGBTQ+ community, being an ally, and how we can all work to create a more inclusive environment. We're very fortunate here in Australia that it's one of the most gay-friendly countries in the world. In 2021, we did have a national census, but unfortunately, none of the included questions were designed to identify data about the LGBTQIA+ population. So most of the statistics we rely on come from privately funded studies, and these only capture a portion of the population. These studies quote varying figures from 3.4% to 7%. We were lucky that here in Victoria, which is the state that Melbourne is in 2017, the government conducted a survey and it found that 5.7% of Victorians identify as LGBTQIA+. So I wanted to understand what this sort of figure meant. And whilst I understand that this is not how statistics work, I just wanted to put things into a bit of perspective for myself. So here at St Vincent's, we have around 5,000 staff members, which if we use that 5.7%, it means that we would have about 285 staff members identifying as LGBTQIA+. And in medical imaging, based on the number of students that we have a year, we should have 2 students that identify as LGBTQIA+. When I first started presenting this talk, I'd been working at St Vincent's for 7 years. And to my knowledge, none of our students had ever been out in that time. And I was the only openly gay radiographer. So again, it left me questioning, if staff and students are having trouble being their authentic selves, even at the gay end of the spectrum, I felt as though we could do more to make them feel more comfortable. And this starts with understanding some of the key terms. Sex refers to the biological sex characteristics. It's the organs, the hormones, and the chromosomes. And this is where we have terms such as female, intersex, and male. Orientation refers to the sexuality, the physical, spiritual, and emotional attraction that a person has. And that's where we have terms like heterosexual, bisexual, and homosexual. Gender is how you think and feel about yourself. It can change frequently. Another term of importance when we're talking about gender is cisgender, which refers to a person whose sense of personal identity and gender corresponds with their birth sex. So as an example, my own gender identity is that I am a woman and I was assigned female at birth, which means I am cisgender. Some other words that reflect gender include woman, which we've spoken about, genderqueer or transgender, and man. Expression can reflect any of the aforementioned traits, as well as behavior, appearance, and language. And that's where we have terms such as feminine, androgynous, and masculine. So many cultures express gender in more ways than just the binary. This is not a new concept at all. It's something that has existed for a really long time. In India, they have Hijra. In Mexico, they have Mujeres. There's Warrior in Indonesia, Two-Spirit from some Indigenous North American groups, and for Afafine, apologies for the pronunciation, in Samoan culture. Sometimes these people are considered healers, sacred or divine, and then in other cases, particularly following colonization, these groups have been ostracized from their culture in varying degrees. In Australian Indigenous groups, the terms that are used are brother boys and sister girls. And here are some images and examples of these beautifully and vastly diversely presenting people. Here I have a short clip of Cassie Workman, who is a transgender comedian presenting at the 2021 Melbourne International Comedy Festival opening night. And I just think that she makes some really valuable points about pronouns and gender here.
I have a relative who likes to mock and misgender me. He thinks it's funny to do that, and his reasoning for doing that is, well, I knew you before when you were presenting as a boy, and you can't just change who you are. And after all, they're just words. What kind of weakling is hurt by words? And I thought about that. I thought, well, maybe he's right, because pronouns are just words. After all, and if you're any kind of strong or brave person, it shouldn't matter what you get called. So I decided to put this theory into practice by introducing him to my friends as a recently released sex offender. You'd be surprised, it turns out words actually do matter quite a bit. Snowflake.
Pronouns are the way that we refer to one another in third person, and they can be gender specific or gender neutral. They can change over time, but this may or may not be reflective of a person who is transitioning. If you're ever unsure of someone's pronoun, be attentive of how other people refer to this person. And if you're still unclear, politely and most importantly, privately ask that person what pronouns they use. Got a couple of little examples here of some conversations using gender neutral pronouns. I saw Lauren come to work today and they seemed really happy. I wonder if it has anything to do with their weekend. And I hope I see them soon to hear all about it. Another variant of a gender neutral pronoun is the ZCZ here. You can see that one below the first one. Some key things to remember about pronouns is to ask. You can't possibly tell what someone's pronoun is just by looking at them. You need to respect and use the pronoun that someone asks you to, and it's not up to you to decide that person's identity. And importantly, you should practice. If you have any difficulty, just practice and ask others to help correct you if you make a mistake. So unfortunately, in the LGBTQIA+ community, we generally have poorer mental health and general well-being than the general population. We suffer from more severe forms of mental health conditions, and that's likely due to stigma, prejudice, and discrimination. In particular, young people in the LGBTQIA+ community are at a much higher risk of depression, generalized anxiety disorders, self-harm, suicidal ideation, and suicide attempts. The leading cause of death in all young people aged 15 to 44 is suicide. And it's really important to note that talking about suicide and asking someone who you believe to be at risk of suicide does not increase the risk of suicide. I also highly recommend looking into completing a mental health first aid course. I've done one and I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I think it's invaluable. And finally, LGBTQIA plus people tend to use drugs and alcohol more often and at higher rates than the general population. And we know that substance abuse has very close links to mental health problems. I want everyone now to just take a quick moment to think of a few really simple privileges that you may have. Some examples might be that you're white or you're male, you're educated, you're straight, you're employed. Have a think of a few that you can come up with along those sorts of lines. And now I want you to think about how these privileges have allowed you to be where you are today. I want you to reflect on some really simple things like access to bathrooms and healthcare, as well as acceptance in society. And remember that others must fight for what are these seemingly basic rights. Being an ally isn't just about creating affirming spaces in your work environment. It's also about creating affirming and welcoming social environments. We should try to think holistically about inclusion. We should listen to the experiences of those around us and try not to be dismissive of them. There's a number of different ways that we might have to support those who are experiencing discrimination. One way can be standing beside them to support them, where we listen to them and walk with them through an experience. Another way might be that we have to physically stand in front of them to help them avoid harm and being hurt. Or we might just need to stand behind them, recognizing that they're the experts and know what's best for them. What makes an environment welcoming is that it feels safe. It's a space where people can find themselves represented and reflected, and where they can understand that all people are treated with respect and dignity. And this happens when services consider and are equitable and accessible to all members of the LGBTQIA community, including staff, students, and patients. We can break this up into two separate sections of what you can perceive and what you can feel in these environments. The things that you can perceive include the physical environment and language, the use of inclusive imagery, artwork, and symbols, positive brochures and pamphlets being available, and the ability to hear inclusive and positive language. How it feels is the overall environment, which then imparts a sense of safety. It's the visible and verbal reminders of safety within the space. It's gender identities being respected. And it's the knowledge that issues and concerns can be raised, and those who raise them feel as though they've been acknowledged and that there will be a follow-up. A small thing that we can do is removing gender from everyday language. So it can be some really simple changes. In Australia, when we're referring to a group of people, often we use the word guys, which is actually a gendered term, and it's something that I've been trying to reduce in my vocabulary. It's not necessary to refer to patients as Mr. or Mrs. Smith. You can simply use their first name or their full name to address them. And also in an email and other formal writing, you don't actually need to use a gender-specific title. You can either refer to a person by their full name, or there is capital M lowercase x, which is mix, and that's a gender-neutral title that you can use in place of your Mr. or Ms. or whatever. If someone discloses to you that someone you know, whether they're a co-worker, student, patient, etc., is trans or transitioning, you should continue to treat that person with respect, care, dignity, and importantly, privacy. Do not dismiss them or lessen their feelings about their experiences. Actively listen to what they have to say. Being an ally is really important. It lets everyone around you know that you're supportive and attentive to the needs of others. And it demonstrates that you want to help change the world for marginalized communities, even if you're not necessarily part of a particular group. Some other key points are that you do not need to ask someone about their body or surgery. Just don't do it. They wouldn't ask you about your genitals, so you shouldn't ask about theirs. If you make a mistake, apologize. We all make mistakes. All you need to do is apologize, correct yourself, and move on. It reminds me of when people get married and they change their surname. It can take a bit of getting used to, but if you do make that mistake, you don't make a big deal out of it. You just apologize and move on. These are a few practical tips that you can do to create more inclusiveness within your space. So simply by including your pronouns on your email signatures, it can help identify to those who use the non-traditional or non-binary pronouns that they can let you know what theirs are and that it's a safe space to share that information. On the next slide, I'll show you an example of using ally and pronoun stickers on your name tags at work. If you have any intake forms for new students, staff, or even patients, include options for them to list their pronouns. Avoid using gendered terms, which we've already spoken about, like using the word guys. Make sure that you have a zero tolerance policy for discrimination, and whether that's actually a formal policy or if it's just a personal policy that you have and the morals that you uphold, that's fine too. This one might be it might seem a little bit trickier, but ensuring that your workplace has at least one gender neutral toilet, and ideally that toilet would include a sanitary bin. It can be as simple as relabeling a toilet to, just say all genders, or like we've managed to do it in my department. We've got quite a few gender neutral toilets available now. And again, on this next slide, I will show you something about pregnancy that we have updated in our department. So we used to have really old posters. I think they were probably from about the 1980s. And I thought that that was a really great way that we could improve some visibility and make for some more inclusive imagery within our department. So I worked with the St. Vincent's LGBTQIA peer navigator to create this poster that you see here. And when we launched that, I also encouraged the use of some different phrasing because, as we know, it's important to ascertain the pregnancy status of our patients. And I encourage the use of, because we're using radiation today, I need to ask if pregnancy is relevant to your body at this point in time. The other images that you can see here are examples of the pronoun stickers and the pride flag that I have on my name tag. I purchased these from badgy.co, which is an Australian company who created these tiny little stickers for the purpose of putting onto name tags. They're really great because you can wipe them down. When I purchased them for myself, I also grabbed a good handful for the rest of my department if they wanted to use them. The best way overall that you can prepare yourself for your first transgender or non-binary student, staff member, or patient is by taking the time to educate yourself in the first instance. And remember that there's an absolute plethora of resources available on a wide range of topics available online. So thank you all so much for your time today.
Thank you, Hannah, for that very powerful presentation. And it's been really good to see that your department at St. Vincent's Hospital in Melbourne have really shown that inclusive nature and been very welcoming of this. I'm going to go to our final speaker for today, and that is Ms. Portia Ramishia. Portia is from Johannesburg in South Africa. She's a radiotherapy lecturer at the University of Johannesburg in the Department of Medical Imaging, Radiation Sciences, Radiography, where she has been teaching since August 2018. She holds a master's degree in radiography and is currently pursuing her PhD. Her areas of interest as a researcher include radiography education and training, simulated teaching and learning, healthcare disparities, and cancer and patient advocacy. Thank you, Portia, for your presentation today.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, colleagues. Thank you for being here today. My name is Portia Ramishia, and I'm here to present to you on the topic of teaching diversity in radiography, empowering patient-centered care. This presentation is coming from my perspective as an educator. My teaching responsibility relates primarily to my interest in pedagogic practice, research-informed teaching, patient or person-centered care, and universal personalized care. I also teach communication and professionalism. On this presentation, we are going to cover the following as presented: understanding of what diversity is, the benefit of teaching diversity, the strategies, some strategies that are used for teaching diversity, and future directions and recommendations. So to start off, let's briefly discuss what diversity means in the context of radiography. Diversity refers to the presence of wide range of backgrounds, cultures, ethnicities, gender, sexuality, abilities, and or disabilities thereof, and characteristics amongst both patients and healthcare providers. In a diverse society, it is crucial for healthcare professionals to be trained in providing care that is sensitive to and inclusive of the diverse needs and experience of patients. This includes radiography professionals who plays a vital role in diagnosing, monitoring, and treating various conditions, which where we're talking in terms of radiotherapy, the cancers and others. So it is important also to note that when we're talking diversity, we cannot talk diversity and not include cultural competency. So, what is cultural competency? Cultural competency is the awareness of and sensitivity of cultural difference, knowledge of cultural values, beliefs, and behaviors, and to add on, skills in working with culturally diverse population. So in doing so, one will be able to also be able to, you are very well aware of what each and every patient that you are serving, be it in a diagnostic department or diagnostic ultrasound department or radiation therapy or nuclear medicine, the patient that you are serving at that time, you will be aware of their history, their personal beliefs, and therefore you will also be cognizant of the fact that people, we can be coming from the same country, same continent, or even the same region, but we could also be different. And the main thing that stands out when it comes to being culturally competent, it's also we are able to avoid stereotypes, because as I would imagine, stereotypes can always lead us to misconceptions about the people that we are serving. So one can ask, what are the benefits of teaching diversity, or why is teaching diversity in radiography important? This and the question to this answer really for me lies in the concept of patient-centered care, where patient-centered care, there's many words that I'm sure you would have heard being used. It's either person, people, or patient-centered care. Most of the times there's also the preference of person-centered care, which takes, it comes with it being more inclusive or being a more inclusive terminology. So in my presentation, I would be going between person or patient-centered care. So the concept of patient-centered care really, which is more about prioritizing the patient's individual needs, preferences, and values. And this concept has really been shifting throughout the years. It has been taking conceptual shifts where from the very beginning there was talks of cultural competence, and now we've moved over the years, moving to diversity sensitivity, where obviously when we talked cultural competence, we focus on cultural specific habits and belief. Then there was also in between there was intercultural competence, that's cultural diversity, and up to where we are, which is the cultural sensitivity or different sensitivity or diversity sensitivity. But the main thing here being sensitivity, because it does not help you being competent, but are you sensitive about it? Right. So this concept also, looking at patient-centered care, it emphasizes the importance of respecting diversity, communication, and shared decision-making between the patients and the healthcare providers. So again, the question is, why do we teach diversity? So in teaching diversity, we will definitely get better, whoever we are teaching them so they can have better understanding of their diverse patient or population they serve. And therefore, when we have that, we have empowered healthcare professionals who then have a better understanding of the patients they are serving. So in a nutshell, the teaching diversity also gives a diverse perspective, and experience is enhanced for the healthcare professionals. In this way, when we are teaching them, the students, or we're teaching in radiography, we are also getting people to also have critical thinking skills, problem-solving skills, abilities. Representation of diverse population in radiography education also helps to reduce healthcare disparities and improve cultural competency, which it is the main goal when it comes to talking about diversity and being diversity sensitive. The main goal also, which is I believe it's a big win, is patients feel more comfortable and understood when they encounter healthcare professionals who share their background or have knowledge of their culture at least. So, how are we teaching diversity in radiography? Or if I may just say, how is Portia teaching diversity in her small corner? So this one really, for me, my tireless efforts in trying to ensure that diversity is integrated in my teaching is overarched by this quote from the Archbishop, the late Archbishop Desmond Tutu, that says, "Do your little bit of good where you are. It's those little bits of good put together that overwhelms the world." This comes in terms of, as you would understand, in industry or in practice, we have people that have come through different teachings, and as the world is evolving, there's diversity teachings or diversity talks are coming through. So one can be thinking, so you are teaching whoever that you're teaching now, but what is happening with everyone else? My main belief is where I'm sitting is, whenever I have taught that 140 students in class, it's that small in that little corner, then they can go and make a difference in the world when they go out there. And so that is how I would say the start or the interest of wanting to integrate diversity in the teaching in my corner, it's that. So here are the few strategies that I have used or that I have seen being used. It is the curricular integration, where including diversity-related topics in the radiography curricula is essential. In my clinical modules, where I teach radiation therapy students, I include role plays or scenario plays where I bring about case studies that highlight the impact of diversity in radiation therapy, discussing cultural competency principles and providing training on communication skills for interacting with diverse patients. Another strategy is work placement experience by reflecting on every experience. So on our side, our students spend 2 weeks on campus at the university and 2 weeks in practice. So every time when they come back, I use whatever experience that they might have encountered there as a teachable moment in every experience that they go through. So culture, where we discuss and reflect on their experiences when they were in block in the hospitals. This will help them in cultural competency and enhance their abilities to provide patient-centered care. The other part, which is also very important, and it also speaks to including everyone, as continuing education, where learning about diversity should not stop after graduation. Continuing education programs can be established to provide healthcare professionals with ongoing training on diversity-related topics. So as much as we focus on enhancing our knowledge in terms of the technical skills, also we need to also be enhancing the skills in terms of patient-centered care, because at the center of it all is making sure that we deliver the best health care to our patient or to everyone that we serve. Right, so the future directions and recommendation. The importance of ongoing research and evaluation in diversity education cannot be underestimated. We need to be collaborating between educators, healthcare providers, and policymakers to prioritize diversity in radiography education. This means when together where we are as educators, and also it helps to share platforms like this to also just share that what are we doing in our corner, to be cognizant of the fact that there is diversity and there's nothing that we're going to do about diversity. Diversity is here. We can only just collaborate and come up with better ways of improving or making it better, and the main goal being able to care for our patient in the best way possible. So incorporating diversity and cultural awareness into professional development for radiographers. So in those short talks that we have in our hospitals, we can definitely also make sure that we include those. So the future recommendations, as I carry on, the process of cultural competency in delivering of healthcare services is is a culturally consciously model of care that defines cultural competence as the process in which the healthcare professional continuously strives to achieve the ability and availability to effectively work within the cultural context of a client, which is the patient and their families. So we need to always be aware, have the knowledge, have the skills, have the cultural encounters, and always have the cultural desire. You can only improve on something that you have interest on, and therefore making sure that we are aware, we are knowledgeable, we have skills. We use those, as I said, in my teaching, I ensure that every encounter that the student would have, we reflect on. It is a teachable moment. We do not frown upon people that are different from us. We can always learn from that. And also that comes with the desire to learn and understand that we are diverse human beings, or we serve diverse population of patients. Excuse me. So as I conclude, teaching diversity in radiography is crucial for empowering patient-centered care by equipping healthcare professionals, particularly those in radiography as we are, with the skills and the knowledge to understand and address the diverse need of their patient. We can improve healthcare outcomes, reduce disparities. Disparities here, I've always highlighted disparities because some of the disparities that we face, particularly in Africa, going to a hospital, coming into our radiology department or the oncology department and go to those machines, it is not always an acceptable phenomenon for all our patients. So we do need to have those skills where we are aware that to someone it might be, why am I coming here? What is this going to do? Which is a different practice to what maybe this person back from the very rural vendor in Limpopo, that they do not believe in coming and lying down under the machine for radiation therapy and not see anything. And also we expect them to understand that that radiation is their treatment when they do not see the radiation. So it is also important. It is of paramount importance to understand and be able to win our patients over, mostly for the compliance and correctness of whatever that we might be doing. It could be the treatment or even the diagnosis as we know it. So through curricular integration, experimental learning, and continuing education, we can ensure that medical imaging professionals or radiography professionals are well prepared to provide high quality, culturally sensitive care to all patients. As you would imagine, everyone wants to be understood and everyone wants to be cared for. So providing person or patient-centered care makes healthcare sense, but more importantly, it's the right thing to do. Thank you for your attention. Here are my references. And there are my details. Thank you.
Thank you, Portia, for a really great talk and making us aware of the diversity requirements that we have within our own profession, and certainly given that a lot of nations are very multicultural, but it's even more important, I think, nowadays anyway. I'd just like to ask you all to just switch your microphones on. Your microphones and your cameras on. Before we get to any of the questions, I just have one big thank you, and that is thank you to Stephen McCollum, who basically put all of this together in terms of organising this particular webinar and organising the speakers and that. So thank you very much, Stephen, for your contributions. Stephen, for those who don't know Stephen, he is the African representative on the Isrrt Education Committee. So thank you both, thank you all, Elizabeth, Hannah, and Portia for your talks. Elizabeth, I'll have a question for you to start with. We think about one of the joys of our profession is to be able to travel the world and be able to work in different parts of the world. But as we travel from one country to another, of course, our culture is going to be very different. What can we do that might help someone, or how could someone assimilate, I guess, within the local culture of a new country that they are visiting?
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for everyone listening to me on this line. Luckily, I've had the opportunity of being able to travel wide, and also had a bit of work experience in England and a couple of other places. I had my challenge, I'll tell you, but like I've been able to define culture is something that can be learned. So as you move around these places, the first thing for a lot of organizations, they do what is called onboarding, or trying to put you through what they do or what they do. For it, you don't call anybody that is older than you by their names, like first names. That is usually done in places like United Kingdom and a couple of European countries. And so when I get an elderly patient, sometimes it's difficult for me to just call out their names like that. I want to put Mrs., Madam, and all that. And also, I remember the diversity thing and the LGBTQ challenges that I had to learn when I got to that space. So give yourself some time, 1 day or two. And like I said, the culture can be learned. And so once you're within that community, you pick up what is acceptable to them, not just what is acceptable to them that is easy for you. Sometimes it's not going to be easy, but what is acceptable to them that will give a positive impact to your patient, and also help you to be able to communicate and get a better outcomes for your patient.
Thank you.
I hope that helps.
Yeah, no, it does. It does. I wholeheartedly agree. I think that's a very good way of putting it, I think. Hannah, I like to consider Australia as a very relatively kind of inclusive nation, and particularly compared to other countries that may not necessarily be as inclusive. What would you recommend for those countries that aren't necessarily as inclusive? I mean, you think that, you know, you had your challenge, of course, of coming out while you were at work, and you were or weren't, I guess, surprised a little bit by the response that you actually got from your colleagues. But I think that Australia on the whole, I think, is a very kind of inclusive nation in that. And I just wonder whether you may not necessarily be as welcomed, I guess, in another country. So what would you recommend for people in those countries?
Baby steps. Take it really slow, small bits, test the waters, see what other people are comfortable with, and go from there. And I guess I had a sort of experience, like when I was coming out, I was raised Catholic, and that's not something, I mean, now it is more accepted in the Christian and Catholic faith, but it certainly wasn't. And I was aware that other people could be gay. Like, I didn't know that I could be. And so I think as well, just having exposure to different people, like once I met other gay people, like it really helped me to understand, oh, like, you know, there's other, like I could be gay, like that's saying it's an option for me is a really strange way, like it was a choice. But you know, that I had to really change my whole mindset, that, you know, I went from being brought up and thinking I will marry a man, I'll get, you know, I'll get married, I'll have children, and, you know, that will be my life. And I had to completely reframe that. And it doesn't mean that if it like, and I understand that it goes against some people's religions or their beliefs. You don't have to accept that, or you don't have to be a part of that lifestyle, but you have to respect that person for who they are. You don't have to agree with it, but that's who they are, and that's who they say you are. So say they are. It's the same as, you know, we wouldn't question your religion, and you wouldn't do that to us. So it's just finding those small little steps and the middle ground that you can find, and just taking it time from there.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you very much, Hannah. That's really helpful. And Portia, thank you very much for your presentation. Do you think that diversity in healthcare is done well?
Where do I start? I think from my corner where I am, thank you again. Sorry, just jumping in there. Thank you. And thank you to everyone listening. From my corner, I would say slowly but surely, we're getting there, that we beginning to be cognizant of the fact that we need to be adhering to those sensitivities, the policies that are being put in place, whether it's in a department or even in teaching, that we need to be aware that there is diversity and not just think it is there and not have anything in action for that. So whatever the action must match the cognizance that we have. So I think I always say, from the rainbow nation that we are, it is, one would think we are very much aware of diversity coming from the South African history, but it has always lagged behind, that sometimes you're just thinking, you know, this is what's supposed to be done, and not being cognizant of the fact that we come from different corners, and therefore we might understand things differently. In most times, I think diversity for us or many people, it has always been the language, and not, it doesn't stop with language. It's many other things that, as we've seen between my other two colleagues who have had the topics, there is difference in that as well, and that is diversity on its own. So yeah, slowly but surely, I think we're getting there. We just need to blow the trumpet a little bit louder going forward.
Yeah, thank you. And I think you're right. I think, you know, every country, that even those that do diversity fairly well, everyone has room for improvement. There's always got to be somewhere where they have to improve in what they do. And yeah, that was very good. Thank you for that answer. I'd have one more question for you, Portia, and that is just around, you mentioned that it doesn't stop when you finish studying. Like, you've got to learn about diversity, and you've got to do that through things like professional development programs and that. Aside from the one that you've just sat in on, what are some other examples of professional development that you would recommend that people could actually look at doing?
The one that comes to mind or jumps out for me, I've always said, and it's also a cultural thing, that we have that side where, being in practice, you find that people also always shifts the responsibility of research or bringing up knowledge to academics, which academics is only a handful. Whereas in practice, people are sitting, you'll find that, yeah, we're sitting on a lot of data that can be used. So in that way, I think I mentioned it when I presented, to say there's talks that we do for CPD points. So every time when we do those talks, we can always just also include something that is in practice more related to diversity. How are we treating the LGBTQ plus patients? How are we including those experiences as and when we having those 1 hour CPD points talks that we have in practices? That's the one easier, quicker one that can be included. And each time there could be different spheres that we're looking at. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That's really good as well. Hannah, Elizabeth, Portia, thank you very much for giving your time, your precious time to come and speak with me today, and also to use the time to provide your presentations as well. I think that we have concluded a very, very good webinar on diversity. Thank you very much to Isrrt for allowing this opportunity to occur. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, everyone, and thank you for joining. Bye for now.
Thanks, Steve.
For having us.
Thank you.
Good to be here. Thank you, Hannah. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Portia. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.